Yeah, I don't think there's any question that I have a propensity for studying Native American. I mean, if you look at the wall behind me, and there's even more. I'm looking forward to this today because I've known this story for quite a while. Paul and I were flying back from Phoenix, Arizona, and while we were waiting on our flight, I picked up a book by was Jack Canfield, and the story of Jumping Mouse was in the book. And I remember sitting there in the airport, and when I finished the story, I had tears in my eyes. It was just so touching. And what I realized was that it was exactly the same story that we find in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Buddha, so many wonderful, noble traditions. It's the same truth. It's just a different way of telling the story. Joseph Campbell is a hero of mine because he stripped the mask off the old Lone Ranger, so to speak, when he came up with the idea that these are all myths and tales about a hero's journey. And the hero is really you and I, if we're willing to go on the journey. He said, unfortunately, most people stop somewhere along the way and they never reach journey's end. He equated it to walking into a restaurant. You walk into a Denny's and everybody's sitting around eating their menus. He said that's exactly what most people do. They eat the menu. They never get to the real food, which is behind the menu in the kitchen. You have to ask for it. They get caught up in the superficial. What's his name? John Dominic Crossan, who is a Bible scholar, writes something to the same extent. He says, my point once again is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we're now smart enough to take them symbolically, but they told them symbolically and we're now dumb enough to take them literally. So what I want to do today is tell the same exact story that's found in the Bible, in the Quran, in Buddha, in so many traditions. It's also in Native American. And so here is the tale of Jumping Mouse as told by the Native Americans. Now, as we go along, I will explain to you some of their symbols and what they mean so that you can see how the story progresses. It's all about a story for going from our ordinary lives and having a spiritual transformation. Bear that in mind. It's all about a consciousness of going from ordinary to the spiritual. And so here's the story of Jumping Mouse. Now, it's not exactly as Tom, I think it's Seven Feathers. It's not exactly like Seven Feathers because I've had to modify it in order to tell it in the time limit that I've got. And so we're going to begin the story with the life of Little Mouse. Now, once upon a time, there was a little mouse, and he did everything the other little mouses do. He scurried around looking for seed and food, his whiskers always checking the ground. He was always frightened and on guard because he always knew there was danger. Being that small, anybody or anything could eat him. Now, already we have a symbol, little mouse. Little mouse represents us in our ordinary conditioned life, always scurrying around, looking at what's in front of us with our jobs, our families, our church, all the things that are immediate that we take for granted, that we're conditioned to. That's little mouse. But one day, little mouse heard something. And so he stops for just a moment. He stands up, he looks around, he hears a roaring, but he doesn't know where it's coming from. So he turns and he says, little brother, do you hear a roaring in your ears? The other mice are just so busy scurrying around, their whiskers on the ground, sniffing, and that he says, no, I don't hear anything. That's just in your head. Forget it. You're imagining it. And so he goes about his business. But you know what? he can still hear that roaring. But for the time being, he gets back to his regular business. Well, one day, Little Mouse decides, I know I hear something, and I know it's real. I've got to find out what it is. And so for the first time in his life, he turns away from the ordinary things that a mouse does. And he starts to look for what the roar is. He ventures out a little ways from his friends when all of a sudden a voice says, hello, little brother. Little Mouse said, what in the world is that? And he jumps off the ground. He says, don't be afraid. Hello. It's I, Brother Raccoon. Now, a raccoon represents knowledge about how to change and to transform. It's the first step. What are you doing out here by yourself? You know, it's very dangerous. Why aren't you back sniffing on the ground and looking for seed? Well, Little Mouse says, I heard a roar in my ear, and I have to find out what it is. Well, says Brother Raccoon, what you hear is the great river. Now, a river is a stream of consciousness, and this is a great stream of consciousness, much different from his ordinary stream of consciousness as Little Mouse. He said, would you like to see the great river and experience it? Oh, yes, I would. He says, okay, come with me, just follow me. And so Little Mouse follows Brother Raccoon, but it's kind of scary for him because everywhere he goes, he smells other things that have been that way, strange things that he's never smelled before, and he's frightened. But as frightened as he is, he goes along with Brother Raccoon until all of a sudden he's standing there at the great river. He's never seen anything like this before. It's powerful. It's beautiful. Little Mouse says, you know what? I can see pieces of the world going by. He said, oh, yes, that's what the great river is all about. He said, let me show you somebody. And he goes over to a quiet area near the river where there's a pond forming. And in the middle of that pond is a water lily. And on top of that lily is a frog. Now, a frog is one who knows two worlds. They can cleanse and rid us of old things. Hello, little brother, says the frog. Welcome to the river. Little Mouse says, I'm amazed. How can you live next to this river? Aren't you afraid? He says, no, I'm not afraid. The Great Spirit has given me the ability to live in both worlds. I tell you what, the frog says, would you like to have some medicine power? Oh, yes, says little Mouse. Now, medicine and medicine power is anything that improves our connection with the Great Spirit. And so he turns to Little Mouse and he says, okay, here's what I want you to do. Crouch down to the ground as low as you can get and then jump as high as you possibly can. And so Little Mouse does exactly that. He crouches down low and then he jumps with all his might. And he sees it for the first time, the sacred mountains in the distance. But as he's looking, gravity take hold and down he comes. But instead of landing on land, he lands in the river. He jumps out and he's soaking wet and he says, what? You're trying to kill me. I could have drowned. Frog says, you weren't harmed, and don't let your fear and anger blind you. What did you see? Well, I saw the sacred mountains. Ah, yes, says the frog. I've got to go back and tell everybody about this. He said, okay, if you must. And so just follow the river sound. Make sure it's always behind and back of you, and you'll find your way home. And so he did. He got all the way home, told everybody about his adventure and what he had seen, the river, the frog, the raccoon, and the sacred mountains. And nobody believed him. They thought, oh, you're just crazy. In fact, we know you're crazy because you're wet. And nobody comes back wet. And so little Mouse is just absolutely beside himself. He says, I know this is real, and I am going to make it to the sacred mountains. And so he begins his adventure to the sacred mountains. He leaves the mice behind and goes to the edge of the prairie and gets ready to leave and go into the prairie. He looks up and he sees spots in the sky. And everybody knows what those spots are. They're eagles, just waiting to eat mice. So he scurries in and out of all the sagebrush and weeds and everything that's out in the desert. And finally, he comes to a spot where there's an old mouse. This old mouse has a beautiful, beautiful, safe place to stay. And so an old mouse represents a sense of contentment, certainty, and security. Okay? And old mouse says, look, I'm glad you're here. Share in what I have. I have plenty of seeds, choke berries, there's water, there's safety. It's cool here. And the eagles can't see you. And so little mouse begins to settle down with old mouse. But he asks him a question. He says, old mouse, have you seen the sacred mountains? And old mouse says, well, yes and no. He said, I know of the great river because I've seen it. But the sacred mountains, I think they're a myth. They don't really exist. Oh, but they do exist. I've seen them, and I'm going to go to them. I think that would be foolish. Why don't you just stay right here with me in this wonderful, safe place? I have everything. And little mouse says, nope, or jumping mouse says, no, I am going to see the sacred mountains. And so jumping mouse heads out into the desert. And as he's heading out into the desert, he's scurrying in between things. And all of a sudden, he hears some heavy breathing. He's like, what is that? And it's this huge animal. It's a great buffalo. Now, the buffalo represents an instrument of prayer and a call to answer someone else's prayer. And so he says, hello, my brother. Thank you for coming. And little jumping mouse says, why are you just sitting here? He said, well, I'm sick and I'm dying. And according to my medicine, the only thing that can save me is the eye of a mouse. But unfortunately, little brother, there's no such thing as a mouse. Well, jumping mouse is just horrified by this. And he steps back and he says, oh, what am I going to do now? And then he realizes what a great beast this is. So much greater than himself and worthy of life. Why should he die just for an eye of a mouse? And he decides, I'll give him one of my eyes so that he may live. And so he says, Brother Buffalo, I am a mouse. And I am going to give you one of my eyes so that you may live. And just at that moment, one of his eyes comes out and the buffalo is healed. He said, wonderful. Thank you, my brother. He said, now I know the way to the sacred mountains and I'm going to take you there. I want you to hide underneath me and run along with me, but under me. That way you'll be safe. And the eagles can't see you. They'll think it's just nothing more than one of the animals on the Great Plains. And so little jumping mouse gets underneath the buffalo and runs along with it. And every step it takes, the ground shakes and he's scared to death but he stays right up underneath them. Eventually, they reach the great sacred mountains. Buffalo says, well, I must leave you, little one. However, I'll stay with you if you want. He says, no, you go back. You have others to lead. And you have the other people, the natives, everybody to serve. So go ahead. And so Jumping Mouse is now at the sacred mountains. And I mean, it is beautiful. Seeds, chokeberries, everything a mouse could want. And as he's looking, he spots a gray wolf. And so he goes up to the gray wolf and he says, Wolf, Brother Wolf. And Wolf goes, Wolf, Wolf. Yes, that's who I am, Wolf. And then all of a sudden the light fades and he forgets. Jumping Mouse says, Brother Wolf, what happened? Wolf, Wolf, that's who I am, Wolf. And again, his memory fades. Jumping Mouse realizes this is such a magnificent animal. Why can't he have his memory? I know how to fix it. And so he goes to Brother Wolf and he says, Brother Wolf, Wolf, Wolf. He said, no, stop. He says, I know medicine that will fix you so that you can remember who you are. I must give you my other eye, and I do so willingly. And immediately, the other eye pops out, and Wolf has his memory. And tears start down Wolf's cheeks. But Jumping Mouse doesn't see the tears because he's blind. Brother Wolf says, I'm the teacher and the pathfinder to the Great Spirit. I'm going to lead you to the great Medicine Lake high in the mountains. And so the wolf leads Jumping Mouse to the Great Spirit Lake high in the mountains. When they get there, he says, you are a good friend, Jumping Mouse, and I will stay with you as long as you want. And Jumping Mouse says, no, you go on back. You have others to lead to this Great Spirit Lake. And so the wolf returns to the bottom of the mountain and leaves Jumping Mouse there alone. Now, Jumping Mouse is now beginning to tremble with fear. He's all alone. There is absolutely no reason to run or try to hide because he can't see where he's going. And he knows that he's out in the open and that an eagle is going to get him. Suddenly, he feels the shadow of an eagle on his back. And he hears the cry of an eagle. He braces himself, and the eagle strikes. And Jumping Mouse went to sleep. But then he woke up. He's surprised he's alive. And now he can see. There are beautiful colors everywhere. They're blurry, but he can see. I can see again. I can see. And coming toward him is a blurry figure. He can't make it out. Jumping Mouse stares, but it's still blurry. Hello, brother, says a voice. Do you want some medicine? Oh, yes, says Jumping Mouse. Yes, I would love it. Okay, then here's what you do. Crouch down as low as you can, and then jump as high as you can. Jumping Mouse crouches down and then jumps with all his might. And the voice yells, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Hang on to the wind and trust it." And Jumping Mouse did as he was told. And he feels himself rising higher and higher. He opens his eyes and he can see clearly. In fact, the higher he goes, the clearer he can see. And far down below him, in the great Medicine Lake, on a lily pad, sits the frog. And the frog looks up and calls out, "You have a new name. You are Eagle." And that's the story of Jumping Mouse. I don't think I have to explain to most Unity people all those symbols and what just took place. But that's the entire story, from beginning to end, of a journey in consciousness. The only difference is we use different symbols. But it's the story about the journey that you and I and every human being can make if we so choose. The first step is quit sniffing the ground, stand up, and begin to listen for the roar of the river and follow it. And that's the end of today's tale. What I want to do for our meditation is take you on exactly the same journey with a totally different set of symbols. So I invite you to get comfortable. And we're going on the same journey in a way, but it'll be up to you how far you go. I'm just going to set it up for you. And as you relax, I invite you to close your eyes. Take a good deep breath. It kind of clear out the mind for a moment. And I want you to imagine in your mind's eye that you are standing in ancient Jerusalem, and all around you is the marketplace. And in that marketplace are vendors, foods of all kinds, flowers. You could smell some of the foods, the breads that have been baked. Take a whiff. You can hear the sounds of the market. There are carts and people and camels. You can feel the heat. Hopefully not 115 degrees like I heard earlier, but it's warm. And that sight and sound, the smells, the feelings have your attention. And what I want you to do is, in your mind's eye now, turn around, because there's a beautiful wall behind you, a large white wall with an open gate. It's not closed. You can go through it anytime you wish. A large, beautiful gateway. I want you to go through that gate into a temple courtyard filled with trees, shade trees, fruit trees. There are small ponds and fountains. It's cool inside. Notice how the temperature is dropped, and it's actually very, very comfortable. You can smell some of the fruits, the lemon trees, citrus. There are benches that you can sit down on and relax. But we're not going to stop here. I want you to look ahead, and just in front of you are some stairs leading up to the main temple area. Go ahead and ascend those stairs, and you're going to come to a flat area on top that overlooks the gardens. And right in front of you is an entranceway into the main temple. Go through that entrance deeper and deeper into the temple proper. There's a main altar. But I don't want you to stop at the main altar. Hidden behind the main altar is a small, intimate chapel. That's the one I want you to go into. And the only thing barring your entrance into the chapel is a very beautiful silk curtain that can be moved with your hand. Move it aside and go into the chapel. And there is nothing more than 2 chairs sitting facing each other in the chapel. I invite you to sit down in one of the chairs. It's very comfortable. The room is lit. There's nothing to be afraid of. What I want you to do now is wait. Wait for someone or something to come and sit in the other chair. What will come will be a person or an animal totem or something else that you need to hear today, that you need to listen to, that has a message just for you. And so for a couple of minutes, let's just sit in the silence and wait for your inspiration to come in whatever form it may take. Let's just sit and wait in the silence. Okay, it's now time to begin our journey back. But before we go, let's give thanks for whatever message may have come to us. Even if we don't believe we received something, we may have. and we give thanks for it. So we leave the small chapel, push the curtain aside, and step back into the larger chapel. We go through the chapel onto the entranceway. We can see the garden below us, so we take the stairs down. We're now in the garden. We can smell the fruit trees again, the cool air, hear the water splashing in some of the fountains. The entrance is right in front of us. Let's take one last look around and then turn and step back out into the marketplace. We rejoin the everyday world. And the beauty of it is, just like Jumping Mouse, we can go to the sacred mountain anytime we choose to make the journey in mind. We can go back to that little chapel. We can have a sanctuary of our very own that we make up. It's up to us. But the promise in all these traditions is that that chapel, that place of sanctuary, that connection with the Great Spirit is always available to us if we choose to make the journey. I invite you now to take a breath, open your eyes, and be present. Let's also affirm our appreciation that we have been given the power for spiritual growth, that we can continue to grow and continue to grow. And so it is. Amen.